Hey guys, thank you so much. Jeannie, Josh, communicating. I just appreciate you guys. And, I know that this Zoom and also, this meeting in particular reaches a lot of people. And I know that I just appreciate what you guys are doing with this because I know that the message of Alcoholics Anonymous is reaching far and wide. So thank you guys and everybody else who contributes to this. It's awesome. I'm Cody Diane. I am an alcoholic. And I got sober February 7th, 2008. And I just thank God, just Alcoholics Anonymous and the blueprint of the 12 steps for where I'm at today, glory to God. It's just, it's been a journey. And it's just been an experience to say the least. So I'll just get right into it. I always think about, and you guys, I got a squirrel brain, so I got a few notes I'm going to look at here and there. I go off and I'll just start talking about something and lose track of the flow of the thing. But I always like to look at, my experience was, I grew up kind of an alcoholic with an identity crisis, right? Like I grew up in this household where, my dad drank, my mom drank, and I just remember, smelling marijuana today. I know this is Alcoholics Anonymous, but it reminds me of Dad's basement. Like it takes me back to, where he would drink an ice house beer. He'd smoke his stuff, and it just, it's that nostalgia of when I smell it, right? But that was the way I grew up. That was the way he coped and he dealt with life. And I just remember growing up, and I remember that basement. It was so cold because he'd always had the door open, but he'd always be drinking, and my mom would be going out to the bar with her friends. And that was just kind of the way I grew up. And, I look back and I was kind of that guy, I grew up in Black Diamond, Washington State. And we live now not far from there in Buckley. It's a little closer to Mount Rainier, more rural area. And but I grew up, and that's what they did. And me growing up as a kid in school, it was kind of like that identity was kind of like I wanted to be like Dad. I wanted to be like Mom, right? But I didn't know that I had this thing in me, this alcoholism thing, this illness, just lurking. So what I would do is I would just, I wanted attention. That was the type of person that I was, right? And that can still show up today if I don't submit to this process. So I just wanted to touch on that identity and just, I meet with one of my sponsees on Saturdays, a really good friend of mine every Saturday. And we talk about this spiritual malady part of this illness. And we have a dialogue about, how does this thing, like, I had a spiritual malady prior to taking a drink, but I was an alcoholic already because genetically I had that physical craving, right? I still had a spiritual malady that was in me from the very beginning, right? This deficiency, this searching for something, right? And so we talk about that a lot. And we were just posed these questions, and we just kind of iron sharpens iron when we sit down and we have these conversations. So I like going deep into that kind of thing, like really trying to look at, this alcoholism as I was growing up. And so that's my story. I was looking for attention, and what had happened was, at 14, I take my first real drink. Had taken some sips, when I was younger with my dad and everything. I had taken my first real drink and gone to my first real party. And I felt like I, for the first time in my life, I was able to, what is it, match calamity with serenity, right? The drink was my solution to all this stuff growing up. And prior to taking my first drink, let me backtrack. My parents had divorced. Alcoholic stepdad moved into the house, and there was a lot of, my father and my stepdad had a lot of loud and aggressive tendencies. So anger has always been a part of my story. And I look back, and I took my first drink at 14, and I was off and running. I felt great. It was something that I had always seeked and searched for attention and other things. And then I took that drink, and now all of a sudden I was there. I arrived, right? I'm with my crowd. I'm with my people. I can be the class clown. I can fight. I can not do that and still feel like I fit in, and that I'm accepted with this group of misfits that drink just like I do. So that's kind of, the long short of, when I started to drink. And so as I started drinking, it progressed, right? I just remember drinking, and, prior around that time of taking my first drink, I'm involved in these friends. But I mean, at home, my home life, my stepdad would drink a bottle a day. It had turned into this very dark setting, right? My sister and I had grown up where you didn't talk about your problems. You drank at your problems. And if there was an issue, you would talk about it. It was shrugged off. You went to your room and you stayed in your part of the house. And that was your safe zone. And, my stepdad's area was the living room where he watched TV with the lights off at 5 p.m. And it was dark because the lights were too bright, right? It would hurt his eyes because, it was just too bright. And, you had to walk on eggshells to go and get a snack in the kitchen and all that type of thing. And that's just how we grew up, right? So fast forwarding back into the drinking, right? And so I would go out. My parents didn't, there was no leash on me. I started drinking, and pretty heavily right off the gate. It was I had found that solution in alcohol, and, it progressed rapidly. I just remember that when I would wake up, not, come to without drink in me, I was very irritable. I was very angry. I was a loose cannon. And when you put the drink in me, it transformed me, right? A regular Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of reaction with alcohol. So I just kept drinking, and that was the MO. And rapidly, right? Just more and more was the thing. And my experience is that every time I drank, there was no stop. There was drink a bottle, drink a beer, and go and block out whatever I was that day, right? That's where I was going to be, right? And then, from there, you don't know. I didn't know what was going to happen. It was just, all I know is when it was in me, I wanted more. That's what I was doing. Nothing else mattered, even if it was at the expense of a relationship. The law, whatever, didn't matter. Whatever obligation, King Alcohol took priority, and just being chained to that. I just can remember that feeling of, I'm just doing it. Like, I don't care how far in the dumps I am, I'm doing it. Just doesn't matter. Once I take a drink, it'll be okay. And if you get me another one, I'll be okay. So page 22 and 23 say opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We're not sure why. Once at a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We can't answer the riddle. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally as positive that once he takes a drink of alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens both in the bodily and mentally sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. And so I read this, and, that's my experience, that craving where, bodily and mentally, right? I need this stuff to be all right, and this is my solution, and I need to be okay. I'm not going to be okay unless you give this to me, right? So this is where, looking back on my experience, I can see this physical craving, where almost immediately in my experience it developed, and it was rapid. So another one on page 30, real quick, guys. I got to go to the book because I gotta give this context into the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and match it up with my experience, because when I read this big book, I got to understand the seriousness of the illness that we're dealing with here, right? And this is my story, and I got to look at this and take this literature seriously. There's been a lot of times in Alcoholics Anonymous throughout my experience, where I haven't been all in, and I haven't taken things seriously on these pages. And so I reference this to just to let people know, based on my experience, this is very serious. And what's written in this book is literally the blueprint of with a key that can unlock the chains and the lashes of alcoholism, both actively, well, once you take that first drink out of your system and then get into recovery. This is the key. And I just say all that to say, I'm going to page 30. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals usually were brief, inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grips of progressive illness. Over any considerable period of time, we get worse, never better. And so for me, I was getting worse, never better. I felt like I had a mental illness at the end. I felt like I wanted to stop. I was walking up and down the streets in, Seattle, looking at the ground, looking for things to get my fix, because I had no alcohol, I had nothing, and I didn't have it in my system. And I felt crazy, and I couldn't put two thoughts together. And I didn't understand this illness, and I didn't understand the reason why I was physically the way I was, but also why I was mentally the way I was, right? When it's not in my system, I'm go crazy. I have no solution. So it was getting worse, you guys. And sobriety looked really good after my third treatment center, and coming out of that, it looked really good. And so what happened was, I had come to the end of a run. And I like I said, I couldn't put two thoughts together. It was that incomprehensible demoralization. And I called mom. I was 21 years old, right? And hadn't talked to her in almost a year. And what she do? She comes, she picks me up for treatment. And I fought her. I made her go drive me to get some stuff before I went into detox. And I went into detox, and I knew I had a moment. I had a divine moment where I knew that I was done. I was putting it down. And I could get into all the stuff that happened all the way up until that point, but that's not, you guys understand how to do that. But what I know is that when I got into treatment and I got out, I wanted to live a different way. And I believed you guys. I believed that you guys had a solution. I walked into a men's meeting that got recommended by a friend of mine who had been sober for a couple of years. He got sober at 19. And I walked into this men's meeting, and there was laughter. There was happiness. There was a life where at the end, last few years of my alcoholism, I wasn't laughing. It was not fun. I was in chains to this alcoholism, and I had to do it in order to be okay. And that to me, to see laughter was like, hallelujah, right? It's like being in a room with the lights off, and you see that, Laughter in Alcoholics Anonymous, all of a sudden someone flips the switch and it's like, holy cow, there's a whole new life out here just waiting for me. And I was inspired, right? You guys inspired me. And so I hooked in, I got a sponsor, you know, and started learning about the mental obsession. I started learning about this stuff where the thought that precedes the first drink. Why does my mind think the way it does? And go, I have no renewing of my mind. I have no, checks and balances in my mind. My mind is on autopilot default, fear, self-centered fear. What am I going to get next? What are they going to do to me? What you're not giving me, right? And I didn't understand this mental obsession. And so page 23, I sit down with my sponsor. We read page 23. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. If you ask him why he started on the last bender, the chances are he will offer you one of 100 alibis, and that was me. So I went through the motions, got to Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Yes, I believe. Yes, I believe in something greater, and then we get on to inventory and we do that kind of thing. And I make a list and I make some amends, and there's some forgiveness and reconciliation starts happening. And I have a spiritual experience, and I continue to have spiritual experiences. And so what happens is my life starts to get really good in Alcoholics Anonymous. I submit to this way of life, sponsorship, steps, all these things. And this spiritual experience carries me through for a while. I meet my wife, I get involved in sober softball, and I'm doing all these fun things. And life was really good until it wasn't, until I stopped sponsoring guys, right? So I stopped going to meetings. I stopped working the steps. I stopped reaching out to people in Alcoholics Anonymous. It was all about my wife. It was all about my first child. There was no balance in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know if any of you in this group get these emails, but I'm on this email chain, right? And there was one recently, and when it always comes up, it talks about working the steps backwards. And it always gets me, because that's my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous sober, is I can so relate to the working the steps backwards, right? And you guys, at 8 years, something happened, and it was really hard for me to illustrate my experience at 8 years and just talking off the cuff. And I wrote it, guys, and it's short, real quick, and I'm going to read it. And this is just what happened to me in sobriety. And this is my story. Okay. So at 8 years sober, I found myself playing victim. I had become a slave to fear. My mental state was on shaky ground, and I had lost all motivation for life. During this time, I had no care whether I lived or died. My thought was that I was already dead inside. Is that suicidal? Probably not. But living in this world became very, very dark and hopeless. My firstborn child witnessed a dark side of me that I regret so much. I had become loud and aggressive. I had become my stepfather, who I had despised for most of my life. By the grace of God, through all of this, I didn't pick up a bottle of booze as a solution to numb the self-centered fear, which often showed up as anger or rage. The all-consuming self-centered fear was a result of turning my back on God and a design for living that really works. Going back to the blueprint of having a current experience with God and the 12 steps allowed me to salvage my marriage and with the woman I love so deeply. I put my wife through hell, and for that, I don't deserve her. Through this process, God put it on her heart to forgive me. He continues to work miracles in our marriage and in our life. God opened my eyes to the angels all around me in AA, and with their hands extended, he threw me a life preserver. Fellow brothers in AA who are absolutely on fire for him and their recovery. My story is a tale of two rock bottoms. One rock bottom upon arrival to AA, and one rock bottom as my life unfolded in sobriety. As I reflect on this sober experience back in my 8th year of sobriety, now in my 14th year of sobriety, all I can say is, thank you, Lord. In my experience, the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Alcoholics Anonymous is truly a way of life. And I'm so passionate about God's way versus my way, because my way is that, I get everything I want. You notice me, you give me a pat on the back, I go my merry way, and I take. And all while I step on you and I hurt you. And how much time do I have, guys? Where am I at?
Oh, you got another 25 minutes if you want.
Okay, cool. Perfect. So, and that's my MO. So I remember sitting in, at 8 years, staring at my wife in her face, haven't worked a step in a few years, and completely disconnected from Alcoholics Anonymous, dry, and looking at her and her tears rolling down her face, saying, what happened to my husband? I want my husband back. And it was like the most cutting, chilling look she was giving me, looking me right in the eyes. And something happened in me where it was like the light came on again. It was dark, and now it was like, oh, I had this moment of identity crisis. I lost my identity. I was completely lost. Self-centered fear was running my business. And I didn't see it. I just didn't see it. And by the grace of God, I had this moment and this light bulb that said, you need to get back to Alcoholics Anonymous and fast, and you need to get a new sponsor, and you need to start working the steps again. So I, after that conversation, my wife and I had relocated from a town closer to Seattle out to near Buckley, Washington. And at the time, there was a strong men's meeting out that way called Bonnie Lake Stag, which is my current home group. And I go to this meeting, and I see guys that are just on fire for the program. I see guys that are brand new, guys with a handful of years, a guy was with all kinds of years, whatever. It didn't matter what the time was. They were all speaking the same language. And what the language was is, we believe in God and we work the steps, right? And we sponsor, and we have sponsors. The passion and the liveliness of the men in this meeting was attractive. I wanted that. I was at a place where my light was off. I was at a point where my pride was at a crossroads in that conversation with my wife. I had to submit, level my pride just enough to be honest with myself and where I truly was at, right? And I had to carry that same level of lowering my pride, leveling my pride, right? Like the book says. And I had to carry that same spirit back into Alcoholics Anonymous, with a handful of years sober, and I was new again. And it was a really humbling experience to go into that meeting and just lay all my cards on the table. This is where I'm at. They had a business meeting the next week. I showed up, and it was, whatever you guys need, I'm here to help. I want to have a service position, tail between my legs, right? I started going to retreats. We were putting on a really amazing men's retreat, and I went to that at that time, and, hooked up with a guy that is real strong in recovery out here, who, pointed me to my current sponsor. We were listening to some speaker tapes, and Dave F is now my sponsor. He's been my sponsor for a handful of years, and I got to business with him and started working the steps again. Started having a current experience with this stuff. I got to go out to California and sit in one of his workshops after we worked the steps together, and meet him and hug him for the first time after not hugging him for 2 years, and meeting via FaceTime, and we still meet via FaceTime. And I was joking today. I called him and I said, "Hey, I got to talk to you today because I haven't talked to you in a while, and I don't want to go to a speaker meeting tonight and share and say that I talk and I call my sponsor. So I got to check in with you, so I'm not lying." That was my whole line with him. But we got to check in and we got to talk. I haven't talked to him in a few weeks. That's probably a little light on the truth. but that man, he was a gift from God at the time where I needed him. He was a messenger of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we started going through the blueprint, man. We started going through, he's sharing his experience with me. We're talking about the main problem centering in our minds, right? The first question he asks me after I ask him to be my sponsor, we have our first phone call. He goes, "Okay, so tell me what your prayer and meditation life is like," right? That's the first question. Well, Dave, I don't do that, right? And I just remember that conversation. He starts laughing. But that's my, but it was awesome to bring that, I'm broken. I'm going to be honest with this man about where I'm at. I'm going to lower my pride and my ego enough to say, man, this is where I'm at. I really screwed up. Right. And I don't want to forget the spirit, how powerful the spirit of that moment was in my sobriety. I don't ever want to regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it, because what I know now today is that when I talk about that experience, my tale of two bottoms, the one in sobriety being, I don't know which one's more powerful, you guys, both of them by the grace of God, but the one in sobriety is the one that I remember, most recently. And I don't ever want to forget the spirit of how broken I was in that moment, because if I can remember that, right, and not regret that, but I can learn from that, and I can look at that and realize that's how much I needed God in my life. I was running on self, and I was so full of fear. And that's what it does when I turn my back on this way and these steps and in the hands of Alcoholics Anonymous. If that's how miserable it is, I don't want to go back there. I truly do not want to go back there. What I know now in my experience is life is really hard. Life can be hard. We all live life and we all have different experiences, right? We have personal experiences. But life can be hard, right? And without a blueprint and without a guiding light in the 12 steps and being plugged into this program, it can get really dark and really lonely really fast. And I always like to remember that, right? And when I get too high on my horse or too low in the dumps, right, I want to come right back to that moment where I'm just right. It's all okay if I can go right back to that moment where I'm broken enough to realize that I need God in my life and the people around me, and I need honesty in my life. From there, all things are possible, right? That's just been my experience, page 68. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role he assigns, just to the extent what we do as we think he would have us, and humbly rely on him does he enable us to match calamity with serenity? Page 68. So calamity, it hasn't stopped. Since that day I had the conversation with Dave, I've experienced a lot of blessings, a lot of amazing things have happened in my life. My wife and I have 3 beautiful children. I've never felt like I've had a stronger relationship with my higher power. I have amazing men around me, just this brotherhood, and it's all glory to God. And I can't put it into words for those who haven't had the experience. And one of the biggest things that started to change and turn the tide on that mental obsession was, because physical craving gets right out of the bat. If it's not in my body, there's one. Check that off the list, right? But I really, with Dave, we really got down in this work, and he started to show me some tools of how do I combat this mind, this mental obsession, right? And now what I know is that this mental obsession can lead me to do not only to go back to the drink, but there's a lot of other behaviors and actions and things that it will lead me back to if I'm not dealing with this mind. And what I've realized is that this mind, the design of the 12 steps is to hook me in, right? It's a vehicle to the solution. The solution is God. The 12 steps are my vehicle to get there with that personal relationship, right? And so when my relationship with God is strong and I'm talking to him and I'm asking him for direction and I have disciplines in place, right? Because I want to remember I got to level my pride just enough to know today, right? It's a design for living that really works. And, if I'm not willing to level my pride today and go to him and ask for direction, I'm going to do it my way. And every time I do it my way, I do it the self-centered fear way, right? Where it's all about me. I can't submit. I can't let you have your way. I have to be right. All these things where I go back to make it about me. And this is where I found in recovery, right? This is where the deep works happen for me. And really realizing this spiritual malady, this is a real thing, right? It manifests in so many different ways, and it has manifested in my life. And, this prayer, this meditation, and this vision that Dave has taught me and showed me based on his experience has been a game changer. This idea that I wake up in the morning, right? And I pray for his will. And I sit and think about that, right? There's 12 different prayers, but I don't have time to get into those different prayers. But the idea is I can make a mental movie about how I want to react in the morning. I can have a vision about who he wants me to be, right? When my wife isn't agreeing with me and we're butting heads, I can picture myself submitting and leveling my pride just enough to not say what I really think or to not try to be right. I can love her. I can listen to her. And it's not perfect, you guys, but sometimes it doesn't have to be perfect for me to realize that I need these steps and I need to go back to basics and realize that I do need God in my life. So, the daily discipline of the prayer, the meditation, and the vision has been just amazing for me. And I know that, everybody has their own experience with the 12 steps. Everybody has a different sponsor, but all I have is my personal experience in a big book, right? And so today, this bright spot in my life, and one of the things that brings me so much happiness is having the experience of being in the dark and the lights coming on and seeing so much more clear. Like, I like to look at it like, how do you know what light is if you haven't seen the dark, right? How do you know what, and I I have a primary purpose today, you know, and I wake up some days and it's like, I don't even want to work. I just want to stay on the phone and I want to talk to guys and I want to go and talk to them, and they see the same chains on them, right? With the mindset and the mental obsession, and at certain different points in their recovery where I just want to be there and I want to talk about this stuff and I want to talk about a solution, and I just want to share this stuff, and I'm really passionate about that. And so I never thought that I would be at a point in my life, right? I always saw that, I never thought I would reach a day where I saw more hope in my life than, oh, it's just another day, right? I always woke up thinking, I feel like, oh, well, it's just another day. What am I going to do today? It was an aimless, I had this feeling, this empty hole. And now, through this work, it's God's put a purpose on my heart. He's put a purpose in my step, in my walk. And I know what I'm here for now. I know what I'm here. I know what role I'm here that he assigned me to play. If I can just listen to him, and if I can just level my pride consistently on a regular basis, he gives clear-cut directions. I've realized that if I can stop and just listen and take these suggestions that the big book talks about, right? They're really, directions, obviously. But if I can do that, he'll tell me what my purpose is, right? So that's been a pretty cool thing to do. And definite bright spot is to share this stuff with the guys that I work with. And, it truly, once the drink is out of us, in my experience, once the drink left me, or I left the drink, or God did what he does, I realized that it's really it's a living problem. It's a living problem, and it's a relationship problem that I had, right? I have a physical aspect of alcoholism. I can't touch the stuff. It does something weird physically where I just want more. But when that's out of me, there's a spiritual and a mental thing that only God can conquer. Only a spiritual experience can conquer. And what I've realized through this work is, on a daily basis, that's the thing. I have to be willing to submit. I have to be willing to surrender. I have to be willing to say, yeah, that was God. That wasn't me, and I have to continue to look at this stuff. Otherwise, I get fast tracked and I go backwards. I start working the steps backwards. But today, I meet with a handful of guys on a regular basis, and we do life together. We talk about marriage. We talk about children. We talk about calamity in sobriety, and it's amazing how when we get together, and where any two or more are gathered is a meeting, right? Like, what's the tradition say? And I love all these meetings we get to have, and we get down to business, and we talk about real stuff. We get honest with where we're at, current stuff that comes up in our marriages, in our parenting, all the calamities. And what happens is, when we can have those phone calls, when I can reach out, right, and level my pride enough, there's my brother on the other end of the phone, matching my calamity with serenity. It's really an amazing divine thing that can happen when I'm willing to be honest, right? And if I go back to the beginning of the book, the first principle that it talks about, and there is a solution, is honesty. Honesty. Nothing can happen unless I'm honest with myself about where I'm at right now, today, in my shoes, right here. It's not about yesterday. It is, but But if I'm getting honest today, it's going to include all that. Right. So I got to remember this stuff. In my experience, I have to continue to have men that speak into my life and speak the truth into my life and speak, love and truth into my life. When's the last time you called your sponsor? When's the last time you showed up at your home group? I'll be doing stuff on a weekend and have plans with my family a lot, right? My home group Saturday mornings, and I'll get texts from guys that I work with, thought this was your home group. Where you at? And accountability has just been, off the hook. When this thing is really live and active, the accountability is just something that I never had before prior to year 8. I never was able and willing to let somebody be fully known to the men in my life and say, you know what, God, you got it from here. I'm just gonna show up and whatever you want. If that means that I got to tell my stuff and I got to get current and I got to talk about what's really going on in my marriage and talk about what's really going on with me as a dad and my anger and my temper tantrums and all this stuff that keeps happening, right? Current. And so I love to share those experiences and hear those experiences from other men, because that's the glue. That's the glue that bonds us, right? That's the common peril. And we can come back to that common solution when we get on the phone and we meet face to face at the coffee shop or outside of the meeting. We can come back together, right? And we can right that ship. And I love that about Alcoholics Anonymous. I love that about, the fellowship of the spirit in Alcoholics Anonymous, not the hanging out and the barbecuing and all that stuff. That's awesome. And it's amazing. But this stuff that I've just described really, I believe is the fellowship of the spirit in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then we can talk about how God's showing up in our relationships and our recovery, and how we're, we feel so much love from this program that it's too good to contain. And we got to go and share it with another guy who's struggling. The very core and the very essence of Alcoholics Anonymous was that. And it was that that kept the other one sober, right? One man talking to another with an honest heart, right? Open heart, and so I'm just grateful, you guys. I don't know where I'm at with time. So what did I just say? I don't even know. So yeah, I think I'm good, Josh. I think that's what I got. I'm gonna end there. I just appreciate all you guys. And I just got to say, just super grateful today. And thank you all for having me again. So thanks.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you for